Right now, as you listen to this, your body is being robbed. Not slowly, not someday. This very second, heat is leaving you, slipping out through your skin, escaping into the air around you, and your body is burning fuel it cannot spare just to replace what is already gone. Because here is the truth almost no one tells you about the cold. Heat does not die. It does not vanish. It is stolen. And on the frozen plains of North America, where winter fell to 30 degrees below zero, and the wind moved across the snow like something hunting, that theft was not an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. Winter there was a silent predator, and it did not need teeth. It only needed time. But physics tells us something strange and beautiful about this thief, something the indigenous peoples of this land seemed to understand thousands of years before anyone wrote it down. Heat can only escape a human body in 4 ways. 4 doors. 4 thieves. That is all. Not 5, not 100. 4. And these people, with no science, no instruments, no written formulas, found a way to close every single one of them. But before we begin, you need to know something, and I want you to hold on to it, because it changes everything you are about to hear. Of those 4 thieves, there is one that no wall can stop. One that no fur, no hide, no shelter on earth can block. It kills more people in the cold than the temperature itself ever has. And the way they defeated it had nothing to do with anything you could hold in your hands. Their only weapon was air. Still, silent, motionless air. So simple that we have forgotten it entirely. The first thief is the quietest one, and it works through touch. Anything you press against, anything solid, is pulling the warmth straight out of you. Physics calls it conduction, and it is patient and merciless. Lie down on frozen ground and the earth will drain your body many times faster than the cold air ever could, drinking your heat through your back while you sleep, taking it so gently that you never feel the moment it begins. This is how people die in the cold without a single gust of wind. They simply lie down. So the first counterattack had to come from the ground up, and the answer grew along the edges of rivers and marshes, ignored by everyone who did not know what it was. The cattail. In late autumn, its seed heads split open into clouds of soft fluff that drift on the wind like cotton, weightless, almost nothing at all. Yet every single fiber of that nothing holds thousands of tiny pockets of trapped air, and trapped air does not conduct. Packed into clothing and boots, it becomes a barrier the ground cannot reach through. Moss did the same. So did dry grass, its hollow stems filled with microscopic chambers of stillness.
And so beds were built in careful layers. First, a mattress of spruce branches, lifting the body off the frozen soil. Then thick hides, then soft furs above, each layer holding its own silent cushion of air. Inside the long houses, sleeping platforms were raised entirely off the floor, because the coldest air always sinks, and the ground is always waiting. Even their moccasins were sewn deliberately too large, roomy on purpose, so dry grass and fur could be stuffed inside around the foot. Now understand what that really means. That is not folklore. That is not luck. That is engineering, written not in equations but in bone and memory, refined across 1,000 winters. They had no laboratories to test their theories in. They had consequences. Get it wrong once, and you did not get to try again. So the ground was handled. But the ground is the slow thief. The second one moves much faster, and it does not come quietly. It screams. The second thief is convection, and it is the one you can hear coming. Here is what almost no one realizes. Your body is not warming itself. It is warming a thin, invisible shell of air pressed against your skin, and that shell is the only thing standing between you and the winter. Still air is your ally. Moving air is your executioner. Because the moment the wind arrives, it strips that shell away, tears it off you in an instant, and your body has to start again from nothing, and again, and again, until there is nothing left to burn. So the war against the wind was fought at the walls. To modern eyes, the tipi looks almost primitive, just poles and hides and a small fire inside. But look closer, and you are not looking at a tent, you are looking at a machine. Its cone shape gave the prairie wind nothing to hit, so the gales that flattened everything else simply slid around it and kept going. And inside, the real design revealed itself.
A second lining of hides hung along the inner walls, leaving a narrow channel between the outer skin and the living space, and cold air seeping in beneath the edge was not allowed to reach the people. It was forced upward through that channel instead, climbing, mixing, warming as it rose, until it left through an adjustable smoke flap at the top that could be turned to follow the wind. Think about what that actually is. That is controlled ventilation. That is a pressure-managed airflow system, the kind modern architects took centuries to name and describe. These people built it out of wooden poles and animal skin, and they did it without writing a single word down. But there was one more weapon against the wind, and it came from the last place anyone would look. Snow. To anyone who fears the cold, snow is the enemy of all warmth. And yet, fresh snow is nearly 90% air, which makes it one of the finest insulators nature has ever produced. So they piled it high around the base of their shelters, sealing every gap the wind could find. And the deeper the drift grew, the warmer the world became inside. In some regions, they dug down into the earth itself, framing the pit with wood and burying it under soil and snow. And inside those shelters, the air could hold near freezing, while the world outside fell to 30 below. Think about the irony of that. The wind was the killer. But the wind was also what carried the snow, and the snow became the armor. Winter, without meaning to, had handed its victims a weapon. The ground was sealed, the wind was beaten, and yet your body is still glowing in the dark. Literally. The third thief is radiation, and this one you cannot feel at all. Every living body pours heat outward into the space around it, silently, constantly, whether you are touching anything or not, whether the air is moving or not.
Sit perfectly still in a sealed room, and you are still bleeding warmth into the darkness, glowing like a dying ember that does not know it is dying. So the answer had to be reflection and capture, and it began with what they wore. Against the skin went soft deer hide, tanned until it moved like cloth. Over that, a looser layer, holding its own pocket of air. And above it all, a robe of bison hide with the thick fur turned inward toward the body, trapping the radiated heat before it could escape, while the leather outside took the wind head-on. Even their mittens were built for this, fingers kept together instead of separated, because 5 fingers apart radiate far more heat than 5 fingers held as one. But the greatest answer to this thief was not clothing at all. It was the longhouse. 60 meters of arched wood and bark, home to dozens of families, sometimes more than 100 people beneath a single roof. And here is the part that stops people cold.
Inside that building, the largest source of heat was never the fire. It was the human beings. A resting adult radiates roughly 100 watts. Fill that hall with 100 people, and you have nearly 10,000 watts of heat pouring out of living bodies every hour, every night, for free. That is not a shelter. That is a biological reactor. The people were not simply the residents. They were the furnace. And nothing was wasted, because the food stores and stacked firewood along the walls acted as thermal mass, soaking up warmth through the day and releasing it back through the night. Not a single watt was allowed to leave. Even the fuel obeyed this law, because out on the treeless plains, where there was nothing to cut and nothing to burn, they burned dried bison dung instead, buffalo chips that smoldered slow and steady with almost no smoke, carrying a scent closer to dry grass and peat. To them, that was simply the smell of home. 3 thieves, all defeated. But the 4th is still waiting. And the 4th one is not afraid of walls. And now we come to the 4th thief, the one I promised you at the very beginning, the one that no wall can stop. It is evaporation. And it does not come from the winter at all. It comes from you. Work too hard in the cold, walk too fast, carry too much, and your body does what bodies do. It sweats. The moisture seeps outward into your layers, and as it spreads, it drives the air out of every tiny pocket in that fur, that grass, that cattail down. And the entire system you spent your life building collapses in complete silence. You will not feel it happen. And then, when you stop moving, the moisture freezes, and now you are wearing ice against your skin. This is the terrible secret of the cold. At 30 below, people do not die of the winter. They die of their own warmth. And against this thief, no hide and no shelter could save them, because the answer was never a material at all. It was discipline. The deer hide worn against the skin pulled moisture away before it could settle. But the real weapon was restraint. Remove a layer before you feel hot, not after. Move slowly. Rest often. Never, ever let yourself sweat. And even their food obeyed this law, because pemmican, dense with fat and protein, did not flare and vanish like sugar. It burned long, steady, and even, feeding the fire inside without ever letting it roar. Look at what these people actually understood. They did not survive the winter by burning brighter. They survived by burning slower. Summer was the season of movement, of hunting and traveling and gathering. Winter was the season of stillness, of storytelling, of shaping tools, of elders pressing a lifetime of knowledge into younger hands beside a glowing fire. Even the rhythm of their lives was engineered so that not one spark of heat, not 1 hour, was ever wasted. And maybe that is the question we should sit with tonight. Our world tells us to burn hotter, faster, brighter, to give everything we have until there is nothing left. So tell me, are we dying of the cold, or are we dying of our own fire? This is Shadows of Valhalla, where the oldest wisdom still holds the greatest power.